You are listening to a unique and special production of the 110-250 Audio Studio.
What's this, a daybird? A young bird? Who's the bird? Where is he?
I should stay in all the ways I should have went instead.
Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino series in conjunction with the 110-250 Audio Studio with photographer and associate Bryan Kato Kitahara of the Kansas City power pop band the Daybirds. As a part of a larger mission to capture the essence, history, and bravado of the late 90s, early 2000s band, we caught up with Kato from his current global base of Kansas City, Missouri, to talk about his friendship with the bandmates, meeting Dennis, the photos, the action, the management, and so much more. As always, Kato paints a lasting picture of then, now, and beyond in vivid fashion. Oh, and we also find out where the nickname Kato came from. Enjoy this interview.
Wonderful. All right, so let's start at the top here, Kato, and I want to know, how did you begin your association with the Daybirds? Now, that obviously forked off into Dennis and other realms, but how did you initially run into these guys and hear their music and get involved with that world?
Yeah, great question. So I think it was 1999, working for my father at the photography studio. We onboarded John Sweetwood, former member of the band. John and I were colleagues. He introduced me to his project, mainly because they needed photos and happened to be working in a photo studio. So that was kind of a layup for him and easy in to get introduced to the music.
When you heard the music, what was your first reaction?
Yeah, hadn't not really been immersed a lot into music at the time. There was definitely some familiarity that I would later be shared with very deliberately towards the Beatles. But I got to say, it was the experience of working not just with the band, but all the music they exposed me to pretty quickly made me realize what I was listening to, for all intents, was black and white, and they turned on and made it full color.
So the one thing that you got to see up close was, because the Daybirds had such a following, you know, when you went out on the road, you got to see the reactions. I mean, even in Kansas City, but when you went on the road with them and you were part of that operation, what was it like when they were at the height of their powers to feel the crowd and the way they were responding to the music?
Very, very typical of any modern day concert. Crowds were engaged, moving along to a natural cadence and really receptive to not just the melodies but the harmonies that were intentional throughout the music. That again, that familiarity written earlier on by the Beatles made that a very easy pill to not only swallow but to I guess receive and appreciate as a whole.
Talk to me a little bit about kind of the timeline with you, from like when you started taking pictures to branching out to other duties. Like, kind of what was your timeline like with the band, and just how did it work out as you were kind of moving along?
Sure. So as best I can remember, I think I came on. They came onto my radar around 1999. Because they needed some, publicity shots, cover shots, promotional material, photographic wise. And so we went out, at the time they were called the Sky Kings, and we did our first photo shoot on William Jewell's campus. It was a black and white. I shot 35 millimeter film at the time. It was on that transition, that cusp of converting over from film to digital. But at that time, I still was shooting on that camera, so I can remember that. The prints came out really, better than I had hoped for. They received it well. So when I delivered, some photo content that was received well by them, they were eager to get me developed more than just a photographer. I started coming out to local shows in town to help promote and capture photography. Getting the band shots, live action of some of the stage. That morphed into really kind of getting ahead of who our audience is. And at that time, email capture was the way to advance the fans at one show for future opportunities. So I turned into that component of the band is to go out and ask the fans if they'd like to sign up on that email list. Each show we would continue to compile that list. That turned into just getting a little bit more involved, working with a local booking agent that would take us out of the KC area and into the regional space. And then that kind of evolved into me going on the road with them to expand what I was doing locally, collecting emails, capturing photos, and then help basically keeping them on track. And in that time, the nickname Kato, I guess, was adopted as a moniker as how they viewed me as being that member of the band. I think around 2004, as another pivotal spot. In that time between 99 and 04, there was a transition from the Sky Kings to the Daybirds for some copyright infringement use, I believe, from another band. So they were, at the time now, the Daybirds, still working at the studio, the photo studio with my father in between shows. And this is when I run into Dennis Rodriguez.
So before we get into that segment of their existence, Dennis was pretty momentous. What was your general feeling of being around these guys? I mean, they were a group of friends. They were hanging out, but they were talented. They had this thing going. How did you, from your capacity, view what was going on with these guys?
There was a unified presence as a whole when they were on stage. It was very clear, both as working directly with them, but capturing the emotional response of the audience. There was a cadence that was unmistakable, a rhythm, a tempo. What really separated them on stage, I think, was that kind of capture, surprise, and delight is transitions of musical equipment during the live set, where a bass player would switch over to the drum set, drums would come up and play lead guitar. And that was also in lockstep. They had practiced this, ad nauseum, so that when they got up on stage, it just seemed like every band should be doing this. That transitioned, well, and it was also unique to them as far as what I saw from other bands at the time.
So Dennis was pretty pivotal with them getting to a break and really kind of bringing them on along, probably in a way that was unexpected, but they tended to embrace it. So let's go to the beginning of the relationship. How did you know Dennis Rodriguez, and how did he become pivotal in that timeline of the Daybirds?
It was around 2004 in the studio, photo studio. My father and I, my father's business, was working in commercial accounts, and basically commercial was everything that's product related and not so much fashion people oriented. So we did a lot of product photography, including food, shoes, articles, you name it. The gentleman came in one time to get a spice line captured for product. I think it was some salsa spices. It's easy, super easy project for us to kind of crank out pretty quickly. Not really sure how he got to our studio, but I do remember him, coming in. And in that time, I was transitioning over from film to digital, so something that we'd absolutely leveraged with our digital photography for a quicker turnaround time. I think that's what kept him inside the doors, and shared with my father a little bit about his background as, we're just kind of getting to know our customers. And my father came up to me and was like, kind of pretty cool what this guy Dennis does, or what he did. And I asked him what that was. And he was like, well, we actually, from what he tells me, he was Michael Bolton's tour manager for like 8 years. And I was like, wow. And my head was so into, doing the photo editing that was required. I dismissed it. And my father kind of leaned into me a little bit again. He's like, well, I think you should maybe talk to him, because you're working with this, these guys, the Daybirds, and maybe he's got something to say. And I was like, yeah, sure, maybe. Again, kind of, dismissive. Like I was out of touch with Michael Bolton. He wasn't really my jam. And it was my father that really painted a clearer picture. He's like, regardless if that's in your musical taste or not, the fact was he was their tour manager and he's in our studio. So maybe you should talk to him. Okay. So as I'm, staring at my computer, knocking out what's called COV process, it's cut out background of his product, I'm facing the screens. He's behind me, and I ask him, over my shoulder. So I'm like, hey, so you were, I guess, Michael Bolton's tour manager for 8 years? He's like, yeah, I was. And very, short answers, concise. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I mentioned that I was working with a band doing some photos and some email marketing and da-da-da-da. And I said, said that piece. And I was like, man, that's my shot. I'm just going to say that. We'll let that lay. He was like, well, give me a call sometime. And here's the first magic that happened from Dennis Rodriguez. I'm like, Dennis, I don't know how to, can I get your number? He's like, my card's right there. And I look down, and it's like right in my hands. Like, how'd that get there? Wow, fantastic. So I'm like, cool. I call him up next day. He's coming up to pick up his project. He's like, well, let me just get to it. Do you got a CD? I'm like, CD? I have all their CDs. I'm their merch guy. So I opened up my trunk like I'm unloading, things that fell off a truck. And I'm like, here you go. And I really thought that was it. I was like, here, yeah, sure. Here's a demo, da-da-da. Thanks again for your time. He calls up the next day, 24 hours later, and it's like, hey, this is Dennis. I'm like, hey, how's it going? He's like, well, I got a question for you. And I said, what's that? He's like, are these guys, are they signed? And I was the dude from Kansas City working for a Kansas City band. So I responded, no, Dennis, the band is not signed. And he's like, well, do you think I could get a sit with them to meet him? And I said, yeah, sure. Yeah, what? Okay. My brain can't fathom what he's trying to ask me this time as a KC band. So I'm doing my best to get all the boys in the room. I say, hey, guys, frame it up. I'm working with this fella, Dennis Rodriguez. And they kind of went through the same steps. Like, he was what? He did for who? Michael Bolton. And so I had to reapply that, simplify that argument like my father showed me. He's like, well, yes, Michael Bolton, also tour manager for Michael Bolton. That's this guy. He wants to talk to you guys here in Kansas City. Do you think you could spare a couple minutes? And they're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And it was just, that's kind of where I handed off the baton, and the rest is history.
Let me get to kind of how things progressed. Once Dennis got the picture, there was a different kind of, it almost seemed like there was a different gloss that went into the band. How did that progress to the point where they had the big moment where they thought they were going to become a household name?
I think it was a slow climb, and there was the post Dennis Rodriguez era definitely infused a lot of excitement, a lot of interest, and also simultaneously branching out and touring in a very West Coast regional capacity. Just really getting the music out there, along with Dennis and all of his doing management things internally with the band. He was very, very upfront about saying you've got a better chance of getting struck by lightning than you do of making it big in the music world. I just want to let you know that. He reminded me of that and the band, multiple times. And obviously you're starry-eyed, you dismiss it, but you hear it, so it sticks. That was, just some sage words that were shared early on. But at the same time, the band's building momentum. They're getting some airplay. They're getting to some larger venues and associating with some larger acts, some from across the pond, and some that were spinning off doing side projects that were attached to very large acts. So this is great. I mean, we're piggybacking off, riding those coattails, and there's that energy building. It crescendos to a point where it takes them, the Daybirds out to Vegas to record with a Canadian backed project that happened to be Celine Dion's husband, or Celine Dion's label herself, and that really was like when the opportunities really started to show with the potentiality at that time.
All of that ultimately culminated to a phone call where the boys thought they were going to have ink signed onto a contract, but things happened last minute, and it was kind of the beginning of them going into a new era. What are your recollections of that kind of culmination of possibilities?
I wish I was more engaged at that time. Well, this is going to put us on a timeline of around 2007, mid 2007, around 2005-6. My workload at the photo studio was really picking up, and I was burning any free time I had with the Daybirds on the road. And there was this crossroads that I had to take care of my livelihood, or find a different way to work with the band. I stuck around, working for the photo studios, my dad's, studio. So there was a route for me to take a step back for the Daybirds at the time, but knew that they were in great hands with Dennis. And there was also some internal turmoil around that time where one of the founders, Phil, was having, some complications within the band, and there was talk about a transition out with another person, John Evans, transitioning in. While that was going down, I was, removing myself a little bit further and further per my own work demands, but I was kind of keeping tabs from afar, and I saw a transition happening. I don't know if it was good or bad, but it was definitely happening, and it happened to be around the same time that they were going to go out to Vegas to record.
So, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this and I'm so interested in it, is that I think there's a level of documentation that should happen. But so before I get to ask you the big question about your recollection of their legacy, I want to pose this to you, in this idea, the question. They were really kind of unique in the time frame that they were in. They were before the digital social media revolution. Do you believe that there would have been a better chance for them to kind of take control of their own destiny if maybe they landed 3, 4, 5 years past when they decided to walk away from the band?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question, Joe. There's the snap reaction is to say, yeah, but if you take a measured approach, what digital did was just allow more people to enter a wider market. So more bands that had easier accessibility to throw their name into that digital pool. Yes and no. I would say yes, they would have had, that's one more channel bands could leverage to get found, for sure. It turns out to be the channel to get found present day. But with more opportunities or more accessibility, I guess, to reach a wider global audience, you also have that many more, startups and bands rather that are looking to get that same attention. So I think it pivots, or it shifts rather, from pre-digital to post. I think that unicorn is finding those metrics within that digital realm, understanding search engine optimization, SEO, which, admittedly the boys were a little tech savvy, and they probably would have had that leg up in the competition to be recognizing how to, in that digital space, do what they can to get top stack, to get into people's ears quicker, easier. So I think, only because a couple of members were immersed in that technology space, I feel like that would have been their competitive advantage going online, for sure.
So right now we're looking at almost 20 years, 15-ish to 20 years that this band hasn't been around, and we're all like going through these memories. And I pose this to you because it's been a couple weeks since we've talked about this. Everybody's had a minute to think about it, kind of swim back through those memories. So if you lean back in the easy chair and think about the legacy of this band, what is it? What comes to mind? What do you think the legacy of the Kansas City pop band, the Daybirds, is?
They were one of the bands in the time that local live music was received well. I feel fortunate to have lived in that time zone, or that time era, where live music was more received. I think there is still an element of live music going on now, but it's being pushed towards more nationally known acts and capturing, or festivals. But, going out and catching a live show and drawing 125 people at a venue that holds 150 on a Thursday night in Kansas City, that was capturable at that time. Is that now for a local band to get that crowd? Maybe. I don't know. I want to say I would like to hope so, but I don't think it is the case right now. So I was fortunate in that regard to be a part of that local KC experience where live music was embraced definitely on that local level. And it made me, my takeaway now is when I reflect on that time, there was a couple key words that come to mind. It's feeling very free, and when I think about my work with them, I felt very free, liberated, and fun. And I feel like part of that was rooted from that awakening to what music was, and what real music, or music, I wouldn't say real, but music that I wasn't exposed to because I was a consumer of commercial radio. And they got me off the commercial radio wavelength and introduced me to the idea that is content that's curated by musicians. That's the awakening. So and I give full credit to that band for being where I'm at now and how I appreciate and approach new music.
The whole goal of this ultimately is to get to a point where more people understand the impact of this band. I think it just kind of hit at a time where people that knew about them, but it really didn't spread more. And I think it's going to be worthwhile for people to be able to know about the band, because I think there's people that are curious, possibly get some of their music. But I think also, too, pie in the sky is, what if you get a call a couple weeks from now and somebody says the Daybirds are going to get back together? What's going to be your response? How are you going to interact with that moment?
When and where? I'm blocking time off. It's going to happen. And I'm bringing my camera.
That's exactly the answer that I'm looking for. Kato, good work, man. You got a nickname. You got bravado. There was so much good that came out of this. So thanks for opening up, and long live the Daybirds.
Yeah, Joe, thank you much for the opportunity to take that walk down that lane. It was great. I'm feeling better leaving the call than I was going into it, just by having that opportunity to talk.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, brought to you by the 110-250 Audio Studio, where we give you a fresh and comprehensive insight into the finest musicians in the world. Thanks to Kato for the much-needed stories and wisdom. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on both iTunes and Spotify. Swing by the Neon Jazz channel at YouTube. And for all things relatable or forgotten, you can go to joedimino.com. Until next time, enjoy the music out there.
What's this, a daybird? A young bird? Who's the bird? Where is he?